predict traffic coming in through the airports or across our borders, because we can't close our borders. That is the most important thing. Whether we have an Ebola pandemic or not, we must keep the borders open, because that's how people like Judge Jenkins and the Democrats are going to get elected. We're going to go out with a look at the TSA's contradictions and how it's handling Ebola. And then stay with us, because we're going to talk about a $1 billion GMO corn lawsuit and how even Ben Bernanke can't refinance his home. Stay with us.
Because it's such a deadly disease, people are scared, and it's normal to be scared. In fact, for the healthcare workers who are caring for people with Ebola, we want them to be scared. We want them to have a healthy respect of the risk of any lapse in infection control procedure. We want them to channel that fear into being incredibly meticulous about infection control.
That was the head of the CDC driving home the fact that meticulous efforts should be made to control the spread of Ebola. Now, of course, it seems that a likely scenario would be shutting down any air travel from the Ebola zone. In fact, a study that was published just last month in a scientific journal predicted that the virus would reach the U.S. by the end of September. The scientists warned that the only way to prevent Ebola from spreading internationally would be to shut down air travel and impose a quarantine. But in a world where 2 + 2 = 5, the CDC says that shutting down any air travel is only going to make things worse. Now, last month, just 2 weeks before this first confirmed case of Ebola hit the United States, Robert David Steele came on the Alex Jones Show and warned that a staged Ebola false flag terror attack was on the horizon.
They will have another false flag. In fact, the false flag I'm hearing about is a simulated Ebola attack in which they actually use biochemical weapons that dissipate, but then they pretend that it's Ebola and that it has been brought here by Saudi martyrs. Okay, so no, we have not reached the end of the false flag line.
Now, Steele elaborates at his website, if the Ebola virus hits in the USA, it will be either a false flag biochemical stand-in, volunteers who are already in the USA will be infected by Saudi clinicians, or white virgins who are not known by the USA to be associated in any way with terrorism will be infected in Europe. Now, U.S. intelligence sources are reporting that ISIS militants are planning to pose as refugees in order to plant operatives in Europe. And the U.S. sources say that the militant organization is afraid of using aircraft due to strict security rules, so they'll use land as an alternative. The FBI admits that another attack on the U.S. is imminent, and they say the Khorasan group could still be working on a plan to attack the U.S. or its allies, and they are looking to do it very, very soon. And a Southern Texas Border Patrol agent has confirmed to CBS affiliate Valley Central News that immigrants from Ebola-stricken nations have been apprehended trying to illegally enter the country via the wide-open border.
Not too long ago, we did catch some people, I believe, from Liberia. Some of our agents did contract scabies and some of the other things that the illegal aliens had. Luckily, it's not something that's deadly like Ebola.
And of course, the Border Patrol agents are only speaking of those that they have actually caught trying to enter the country illegally. Who knows how many people will be able to enter the country and won't get caught. But don't worry about the wide open border. Don't even think about shutting down any air travel from Ebola-stricken nations. No, the CDC only wants healthcare workers who are already dealing with Ebola patients to use meticulous efforts to make sure that this disease is not spread. What about the TSA? Now, we've already spoken a lot about how Ebola has been extensively studied for its use as a bioweapon. Shouldn't the TSA be doing its job and protecting the nation from a potential terror attack?
I expected that they were going to take my temperature, they were going to ask me lots of questions, but they didn't. I said, I'm a journalist, I've come back from Liberia, I was covering Ebola. He started to hand my passport back and say, welcome home, but instead he said, oh, wait a second, I got an email about passengers like you, hold on a second. And he went and conferred with someone, and he didn't know, and they conferred with someone else, and in the end he said, you need to watch yourself for signs of Ebola. And I said, well, what am I watching for? And he couldn't tell me.
Meanwhile, we have the scientists who first discovered Ebola warning of an apocalyptic type scenario if this mutates. And then we've got the federal government on the other side refusing to shut down any air travel from the Ebola-stricken nations, refusing to even implement a quarantine. So, of course, the Ebola false flag is going to roll out as predicted.
DNA Force.
When cells become toxic, they die early and aging sets in.
DNA Force.
No one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. Just one of the key compounds, BioPQQ, is backed by major clinical studies.
DNA Force.
We now have the synergistic solution. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139.
DNA Force.
The globalist social engineers are not just targeting us with propaganda. They are manipulating our genetics. We are being targeted at every level by estrogen mimickers that lower our testosterone and other hormones and natural compounds that the body needs. After consulting top doctors, nutritionists, pharmacists, and others, we have developed what I believe is the ultimate non-GMO organic super male vitality formula sourced from powerful organic herbs and then concentrated for maximum potency. Super Male Vitality was developed to activate your body's own natural processes instead of using synthetic chemicals. Super Male Vitality by InfoWars Life is so powerful that I only take half the recommended dose. For a limited time, we are offering 15% off Super Male Vitality at InfoWarsLife.com to introduce you to this powerful supplement. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today to secure your Super Male Vitality. InfoWarsLife.com.
And yet another example of how out of control the war on drugs has become and how dangerous it has become, not only to our liberties, but to our lives. We have Georgia drug warriors just outside of Atlanta raiding someone who is growing okra in his own yard. Yes, this is someone, a retired man, growing okra in Georgia. And he says, first thing he wakes up and hears a helicopter. He said he was scared actually at first because he didn't know what was happening. A chopper was setting very low. Then deputies show up with canines. And he said they were strapped to the gill, evidently talking about how they were fully in SWAT uniform. And their reply is, well, it looks very much like cannabis. You know, we can't really tell the difference between okra and cannabis. We're still trying to identify it. It looks very similar to a cannabis plant. But as the fellow thought about it more, he thought, you know, anything could have happened. And we have seen over and over again, poor people, rich people, white people, black people, rural, urban, inner city, people dying everywhere because of no-knock raids. And if they don't kill you when you defend your house thinking that you're being invaded, and if you kill one of them trying to defend yourself, you will find yourself like this man in Texas fighting for his life in court because he shot a sheriff's deputy in a no-knock raid. Now, maybe you should just fire warning shots. Well, even firing warning shots can get you in a lot of trouble.
I'm an avid supporter of the Second Amendment as well as self-defense rights. Somebody comes at you, you have to defend yourself. I understand that, of course. So a guy comes into your home, he comes into your business, he threatens your family, he threatens you personally. What are you going to do in that situation? Well, you may show mercy to the person. You may fire a warning shot. But just because you show mercy to the attacker, don't expect any mercy from the court system. Such is the case of a Florida father who is facing 20 years in prison for firing a warning shot against a man who is endangering his teenage daughter. The jury found the father guilty of child endangerment as well as other charges. No one was hurt by the round. Another Florida shooting that was overshadowed by the Trayvon Martin trial was that of Marissa Alexander. After being chased throughout her home by her abusive husband, Marissa fired a shot at her husband to scare him away.
I believe when he threatened to kill me, that's what he was going to do. That's exactly what he intended to do. And had I not discharged my weapon at that point, I would not be here.
But the right to self-defense doesn't extend to excessive force. Yes, you can defend yourself from somebody who's an immediate threat to you, but after that threat has passed, you can no longer assault that individual.
Ursuland is accused of shooting and killing 16-year-old Antoine Parker. Surveillance video shows Parker and a friend trying to rob the Reliance Pharmacy in South Oklahoma City last May. It also shows Ursuland fighting back by shooting Parker once initially and then coming back and shooting Parker 5 more times.
To bring you the broader spectrum of this clip, the pharmacist produces his own firearm and shoots back at the guys. He hits one of them in the face, knocking him to the ground. No issue there. The pharmacist comes back into the pharmacy. He sees the guy laying on the ground and then shoots him 5 additional times. Keeping in mind, this is a guy on the ground with a bullet in his face. You can't shoot somebody until they're dead. You can only shoot them until the point where they're no longer a threat. In closing, you do have a Second Amendment right, but be careful how you use it. Because whether it's shooting somebody until they're dead, or if you take the Joe Biden approach and issue a few warning shots, either one of these tactics could end up with you in a prison cell. You can find more reports at INFOWARS.com.
If you want to protect yourself, get a double-barrel shotgun. And I promise you, as I told my wife, we live in an area that's wooded and somewhat secluded. I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here or walk out, put that double-barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts outside the house.
A $1 billion lawsuit filed today sheds some light on GMO. Even China doesn't want it in their country. Even China is banning it. And that's caused them, out of uncertainty, to essentially ban all U.S. corn. Courthouse News Service reports that seed giant Syngenta faces billion-dollar class actions in 3 states, claiming that China is restricting U.S. corn shipments because Syngenta released a genetically altered variety before the crop was approved for export to China. Syngenta, quote, destroyed the export of U.S. corn to China and caused depressed prices for all domestic corn. Well, while China may have embargoed all U.S. corn, essentially government regulators are starting to embargo mortgages. Even Ben Bernanke can't refinance his mortgage. Now consider Ben Bernanke's situation. He's making about $250,000 per speech, doing quite a few speeches. He's got a multi-million-dollar book contract in the works, and he's only trying to finance an $839,000 home. So his ratio is probably less than 0.4 of the price of his income to the price of the home that he's getting. Compared to a typical American, the median price of a home in the United States is $189,000. The median U.S. income is $52,000. So that means that you're looking at about 3.5 times what you're making in a house for somebody else, whereas Bernanke is looking at something that's maybe a third of his income, and even he can't get a refinance. This was something that came out at a mortgage conference on Thursday. He surprised everybody. It's been reported on by a lot of different outlets, New York Times, Bloomberg. He said, just between us, and he was on stage in Chicago on Thursday, he said, I recently tried to refinance my mortgage, and I was unsuccessful in doing so. It's not that he can't qualify. It's the banking regulations. And if you look at this article from Bloomberg, look at this chart where it shows that essentially total mortgage credit has flatlined and it has not recovered since 2008. Now, one of the reasons that this is happening, of course, is the Dodd-Frank bill, which essentially was nothing but a golden parachute for those 2 criminals to retire on. They set up the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010. And if you believe that that's really protecting consumers, you're not paying attention. What it's doing is restricting the market. And as they point out in Bloomberg, they say the risk pendulum has clearly swung too far from reckless to fraidy cat. The reality is that lenders should be the ones making the decisions and risking their own money. We have this kind of Byzantine regulation shutting down credit because we have allowed the big banks to socialize their losses. The big banks, or any lenders for that matter, should be able to determine who they want to lend money to. They should be able to set the parameters of the risk, and then they should get the rewards or suffer the consequences. That's what you do in a free market. That's what we should be doing here. Stay with us. When we come back, we're going to take a look at Hong Kong and at ISIL. We'll be right back.
I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off Super Detox Special at InfoWarsLife.com.
Introducing the first proprietary oxygen-based intestinal cleanser, OxyPowder. Backed by FDA-approved Phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. All the toxins from the air, the food, the water, ultimately ends up in the gut or affects the gut. Take your health into your own hands and start cleansing your body today with OxyPowder. Secure your OxyPowder today at InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com.